They're two happy women bringing you inspiring stories, politics, pop culture, and lifestyle hacks, all with an eye to making our communities and our country a better place to live. It's the Happy Women Podcast with your hosts, Jen Horn and Katie Gorka.
Thanks for joining us and welcome to another episode of the Happy Women Podcast. I'm Jennifer Horn.
And I'm Katie Gorka.
I don't even know what number we're on anymore, but I feel like the news cycle has been there's been so much. I feel like there has been so many topics that we've already covered on Happy Women, Katie. And today it's another example of that. And the new nominee for the Democrat Party, Kamala Harris, has picked her running mate, her vice presidential pick. And she had a long list. It was interesting. She had about 6 people on the list. Mayor Pete, she had Gretchen Whitmer, she had the governor of North Carolina, who I thought it was funny, kind of backed out on his own. Then it sort of dwindled down to 3, and we thought it was either going to be Senator Mark Kelly from Arizona or Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro or Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. A lot of people, I think, including our colleague Hugh Hewitt, was sure it was going to be Josh Shapiro because he would have brought her the ability to get Pennsylvania because he is a very popular governor. And he's a little bit more moderate, I guess we could say, than Tim Walz, but he's out. Tim Walz is in. And it seems that these two have a lot in common when it comes to progressive ideology. And a lot of folks are saying that this is the most progressive presidential ticket that we have ever seen in this country.
I think it's the socialist dream team. I mean, and he's even, there's this funny quote going around about what is one person's socialism is another person's neighborliness. I mean, what a ridiculous quote that is. But yeah, I mean, in some ways, though, I think it's good news for us because they've taken off the mask. This is a really radical pair. And it's time for Democrats in this country to wake up and recognize this is not your father's Democratic Party anymore. This is not even the Democratic Party of the 1990s. They've gone over the edge with this. They've gone over the precipice. I think this might help to open up people's eyes. And the only question will be, to what extent will the mainstream media collude with this team to make them appear as moderates? I think they are trying desperately hard, but neither one has a moderate record. And we need to educate people on their record and what they've done.
And what their future vision of America is. I mean, clearly, these are people who are willing to throw out the American worker for green energy. These are open border candidates, both of them. These are people who are very socially liberal as well. And of course, love to sow seeds of chaos by allowing for crime to run rampant. And I think we can go through all of these. I thought maybe kind of a good way to go through this is we can go through some things to know about Tim Walz and kind of comment together. Breitbart has put together a list of just 7 things to know, and I'm sure there will be more about Tim Walz. But the first thing, and we can touch on a few of these.
Well, and while you're looking for that, I'll just mention, I thank my friends at the Center for the American Experiment for forwarding me a list of articles. They have done great work in the cause for freedom in the great state of Minnesota. And they forward a whole series of articles where they brought up parts of his record as well. One of them making the case, this was A Tale of Two Tims. Published originally in the American Experiment, where he tracks how Walz really portrayed himself as a moderate when he was campaigning. And then once he was elected, he went full radical. And this
Sound familiar?
Yeah, right. And
Kamala, Biden, everybody.
2 points in particular. Early on, he instituted a 70% increase in the gas tax in Minnesota. And the second was a 50% renewable energy mandate. And he is saying that he wants Minnesota to be 100% carbon free by 2050.
And that is obviously along the same lines with Kamala Harris, who is a co-sponsor of the Green New Deal. And you wonder how that plays with the people in Pennsylvania, with the people in Ohio that are not part of that world. They don't have a future in that world that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz want to create. Now, number one item in Breitbart, and this is in no particular order, and we'll talk about the George Floyd riots and all of that, but apparently a June report from Minnesota's legislative auditor found that Walz's administration failed miserably in its duty, this is quoting now, to properly oversee millions of federal dollars it administered to nonprofits to feed children. The report said that Walz's alleged incompetence created opportunities for fraud. The report highlighted several ways in which the Walz administration failed to rein in the fraud, undercutting the governor's longstanding claims that his agency staff deserve credit, not criticism, for the efforts to catch and stop it. And what I think is interesting about this is that it shows that there is a lack of ability to lead, right? We have someone who has these programs that are supposed to help kids, our most vulnerable, but they're being mismanaged. This is very consistent to Kamala Harris. And Katie, when we talked about last week Kamala Harris's record, one of the things that has followed her is that she's very difficult to work with. She had a huge turnover rate in her office as vice president. And in her time as prosecutor in San Francisco, she was mismanaging that office all day long. So if these are the two candidates, who is actually going to be in charge? Who's going to be the one who's going to provide leadership? It seems both of them struggle with this.
And I think this is an important point, especially on the spending and corruption issue at a time when a growing number of Americans are deeply concerned about our nation's indebtedness,
Right.
and our failure to rein in the budget. So do we really want to bring in two people who are avowedly tax and spend radical progressives? I don't think so.
Yeah, especially when they aren't keeping those funds accountable. Now, this is something you and I talked about before we started recording, and I know this is a big one for you. Walz signed legislation to allow minors to get sex change operations in Minnesota. He signed a bill to require schools to stock period products in the boys' bathroom. Again, it shows you his heart. And these are kinds of the same qualities that Kamala Harris had created in California. And I think the country needs to ask itself, do we want to California the rest of the nation?
Well, and I think parents are already saying they do not. We've had more and more stories come out, heartbreaking stories about parents who've been separated from their kids by states that think they have a greater right than parents to control the upbringing of their children. And I think parents are speaking. And again, here's what I'm grateful for. We have been seeing since about, I want to say mid to late 2020, from the sort of early days of the COVID shutdown, as parents woke up to what was being taught in their kids' classrooms, right? Because kids were at home and on computers. Parents have really mobilized. We've heard about the famous ones, Moms for Liberty, Moms for America. But what I saw in my time at the Heritage Foundation, there are thousands of groups all over the country because they do not like the fact that their kids have been put on the front line of this culture war. Here you have two of the leaders of that culture war. And I think parents will not accept this. And as long as we keep talking about this and parents know that this is the kind of leaders they are, I think they will vote against it.
And, that became such a huge issue in your state. When Biden was the candidate, President Trump was tied essentially with him in Virginia, in your home state. Makes you wonder if that kind of ideology is going to really help Kamala Harris at all. And in many ways, I think it'll hurt her in a state like Virginia, where Glenn Youngkin made that his top campaign issue.
Yeah, no, I think it's going to hurt them all over. And I think this is a really important detail. So, what I see from my perspective here in Virginia is young parents of kids oftentimes are not engaged politically. They don't have the bandwidth to be engaged, right? It is really absorbing, to be like taking care of young kids and having a job at the same time. So the fact that so many parents have been mobilized to get involved politically because of the radicalism in the schools, because of radicalism by leaders like Walz, I think it's going to turn out to be a really decisive factor.
Yeah. I think actually this is probably the best pick she could have made. If you're a Republican, if you're a Trump supporter, this might be the best one, but we'll see.
I think you're right.
I don't want to get optimistic yet, but this is the big one. Okay, so on Breitbart's list, number 3, Walz allegedly failed to anticipate and react to the riots in Minneapolis after the death of George Floyd. Even the liberal mayor of Minneapolis, Jacob Frey, slammed his response to the riots. And I dug around with this earlier. There has been a huge kind of pass the buck game between Jacob Frey, the mayor of Minneapolis, and the governor, Tim Walz. Jacob Frey says that he, as the mayor, called when things started to get out of hand and asked the governor for the National Guard. And he said, well, I'll take it under advisement. I'll consider it. Would not want to bring in the National Guard. They would put out these messages saying the National Guard was standing by, but they were literally just standing by and watching as police precincts burned to the ground. Businesses were destroyed. Black communities were destroyed. And the governor sat by idly and didn't bring in the National Guard until it was really so far gone. And you could probably make the argument that by allowing that to erupt in Minnesota, that type of behavior and chaos spread across the country after the death of George Floyd.
Yeah, so there was a very good documentary done about the death of George Floyd and the subsequent protests, and the whole story about that police precinct, which was overrun and destroyed by protesters, is really heartbreaking, where you have members of the police speaking out about what had happened and saying it was an unbelievable sign of weakness to give up that police station. They never should have done it. That's you just think about what's happening in the world right now, how, really we are on the precipice of some potentially major conflagrations because of what, Hezbollah is doing, what Iran is doing, what China could potentially do. And you want to tell me that we're going to have someone like a Walz in power, a Walz Harris ticket, like, really, we're going to see them sitting across the table from Putin or Xi and telling them no? It's a terrifying thought.
No way. Yeah, it is terrifying. And this is the thing with Kamala Harris, too. She also got involved with George Floyd. She was bailing people out that were actually arrested. The few people that were arrested, she was bailing them out. It's just these two seem like two peas in a pod, unfortunately, for us as a country. Number 4, and this has tones of the Biden administration. Under Walz's leadership, Minnesota gives free college tuition to illegal immigrants. Minnesota sounds a lot like my home state of California.
Oh, my gosh.
You know, the Biden administration illegally paying off people's college tuition. This smacks of socialism, and it's insulting to people who have actually gone through and paid for their own college education. It's not a fair use of taxpayer money in my mind.
No, absolutely not. And where it's also, I think, really devastatingly insulting is to those kids, and there are a lot of them out there, those kids that in exchange for committing to service in the military pays their tuition, and then they in turn go and serve the country. What does this say to them? Go get a handout. Go get a handout instead. Don't serve your country. It's such a slap in the face.
It's very anti-American messaging. All right, number 5 on this list, Walz signed a bill into law that gives driver's licenses to potentially 77,000 eligible illegal aliens. Now, this is one of the most widely distributed ones. Again, he is very pro-open border. Those driver's licenses go out, and you know what happens next. It's the voting, it's the chaos that is caused with a rule like this. But if he's willing to do it, and we know what Kamala Harris did as the quote unquote border czar, what do we expect from a potential administration? This is going to be just the beginning of our problems.
And I'm going to say on this issue as well, many, many Americans are keenly aware of the threat to election security from illegal voters. We're seeing this all over the place. This is a hot issue here in Virginia. We know we have documented proof that illegals, not only that illegals are getting onto the voter rolls, because actually our state electoral board removes some of them. So we know for a fact that they're getting on, but not only that, we know that they have voted.
Yeah.
And we have proof of that too. So the thing is, many people are really concerned about this. So to have someone take a position that they support this, I think is going to bring about a tremendous backlash.
I think so too, because I really believe that as much as Democrats say that this election is about abortion, this election is about I believe, two things: the cost of living, inflation, and the open borders. But we'll see who's
Okay,
right.
but I'm going to add, I think safety is increasingly
I do too. And
an
we're going
issue
to
as
talk
well.
about that actually, because I think safety is on there too. People don't feel safe anymore.
Yep.
All right, two more here on this list. Walz openly championed socialism last week during his White Dudes for Harris event. That's when he said that one person's socialism is another person's being neighborly. And finally, Walz was also a radical member of the House of Representatives, with Heritage Action giving him a lifetime score of 13%. So there you have it. Those are just a few of the things that Breitbart at least put together after this big announcement about Tim Walz. I think most of us know him, though, for his very poor leadership during 2020 and all of the tumultuous times that this country faced. And had we had a strong leader like he would like to be for the country, maybe it wouldn't have been so bad.
Okay, so I just want to add this, because I think for people like you and me, and people like many of the people who listen to us and listen to our podcast.
Thank you, by the way.
This is just reasonable for us. Like, we know these things. We do the research. We know it's true. But I think what it's easy to forget sometimes is the degree to which other people, don't simply bother with politics, or they live in a bubble where they're insulated by places like CNN and NPR and the Washington Post. And so I think for those of us who care about this, it's really important that we spread the message. We have to take the record, print out these articles, out. There is a lot of documentation of both Harris and Walz's radical records. Don't worry about upsetting your family member, your child, your friend, who thinks that they want to vote Democrat. You got to educate them on this record, because I have a hard time to believe that anything more than 5% of radical progressive Americans would want to support this kind of vision for the future of America.
I agree with you. And I think that this is where I know one of the things that we always talk about is about what we can do, right? There's power in the individual. And here's where your power comes in. If you need some inspiration, you have the ability to spread truth. You have the ability to tell people, to correct a record that the mainstream news media is going to intentionally leave out. And so it is incredibly important for you to talk. You don't have to be angry or aggressive. Talk to your family, your friends, and this is the time. Take those articles on Tim Walz's record, on Kamala Harris's record, and get on social media and post, because this is how people might get a glimpse of the truth. Because we've seen what the mainstream media has done with Kamala. They've lifted her up like she is a warrior, like she is a Wonder Woman coming to save our country. And so it is important that we take all of our opportunities to try to impact even one person with the information that we can spread around. So it's important.
Absolutely.
Now, you wanted to talk about safety. I know you've been putting out some information for the GOP for Fairfax County and Virginia as the chairwoman there for the party. Safety is a huge issue. I mentioned the border and I mentioned inflation. I do believe safety is right there, especially in bigger cities. People are constantly feeling like they are having to look over their shoulder. I don't remember a time in Los Angeles where I've lived where I feel less safe, I think. And I've grown up here my whole life. So take us through what you've learned. I know you were personally impacted by one of these stories.
Yeah. So the reason I wanted to talk about this is because I send out a weekly letter to our Fairfax GOP members. And in my last one, I told a story, and I was really shocked by just the outpouring of reaction with people sharing similar stories. Like, this is becoming a really common thing. So my personal story was that my son and his fiance were driving in Richmond, Virginia. Mm-hmm. He has just started med school there, I say as a proud mother. And they were driving along and they got absolutely smacked in their car. They got sideswiped by a car that was chasing an ambulance. Thank you, God. Neither one of them was hurt, which is just an unbelievable blessing. But they were really shaken up. They had been hit really hard, and the car mm-hmm. was, $5,000 worth of damage later. But here's the thing about it. There were two people in the car. The person driving did not speak English and did not have a driver's license. And what my son and his fiance realized only after the whole sort of police reporting thing was over is that on top of all that, the driver lied and passed himself off as the passenger. So here's what's so interesting about it. So aside from all the obvious frustration that this should even go on, but I have been shocked by the number of people that responded to my letter telling me similar stories. It is just incredible. People have to realize not only do we have this flood of unvetted illegal immigrants, and on top of all that, we were just talking about another story which utterly shocks me. Our friend Jennifer Van Laar at Red State has been talking about a story called the CHNV Parole Program. This was a program set up by Joe Biden. And this is not people walking across our border. This is people being flown into the United States from
the
Cuba,
government money, on
government money,
yes.
Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, Venezuela, up to 30,000 of them per month. So we've got this flood of people coming into our country that did not go through high school driver's ed the way we all did. Some of them are getting driver privilege cards. Some of them are not. But I'm telling you, the safety issue is a really big factor. And I think for more and more people, it's hitting close to home. And I will just say, lastly, Walz is a anti-police candidate. I mean, he's not going to, he's not going to restore our safety.
No. And I think, there are so many different things that we have to watch out for. I was just looking at on that. First of all, it's important to note that those people who are flying in here are not being counted as people crossing into the country. They're being left out of the tally. So when you're hearing 8 million people under Joe Biden, I would imagine that number to be much, much higher because of all these loopholes that the people they sneak in that they don't want to count, which is infuriating. And one of the other pieces of that when it comes to safety, as you mentioned, not only the accidents, but the DUIs. And then people panic. I mean, we heard the horrific story, and it might have been Jennifer Van Laar who reported on it, the family. And I actually interviewed the man. It was Jennifer Van Laar who connected me, a man whose son was killed with a simple traffic accident in San Francisco. He was on a motorcycle. An illegal immigrant hit him, just knocked him off the bike. But the illegal immigrant panicked because he knew that police would be coming. And in his effort to get away, he backed over the boy 3 times, killing him. This man's son would not have been dead had the illegal immigrant not panicked in an effort to get away from police and was run over and killed. Now, from the DUIs to all of the traffic accidents, this is one of the threats of having an open border. In Los Angeles, where I live, one of the other big problems is maybe not so much a threat to public safety, but it is violating all of the robberies and burglaries that are going on in California, from smash and grabs into stores, people breaking into people's houses. We actually had a story last week of a criminal who left behind a note that said, "Sorry, I'm not coming back. I'm no threat to you. I just needed drug money," and left a Post-it note at a store that they robbed. And so I was reading a story today, and actually John Solomon, who I like very much, was talking about this because inflation is up so much. Even though the Biden administration is trying to tout that violent crime is down, burglaries, nonviolent crimes are up by like 25%, I want to say. And this is huge. And this is the intersection of the economy and the intersection of lawlessness. And that allows people to think that they can walk in and steal what they need. People are actually hurting economically, probably in some cases. They're feeling desperate and they think there is no law and order anymore. So they go in and take what they need. And this is the problem when you have a multitude of issues with this ideology that's been presented by the Biden administration and will be continued by the Harris administration. It's the intersection of all these problems coming together and creating nothing but a sense of people not being able to feel safe in their house or in their businesses or on their way to work. But it's also the fact that we are having problems economically. You've got the illegal immigrants in here. Everything is coming together to show the situation that we're in. And we have to ask ourselves if we can handle 4 more years of that. And my answer is no. I don't want to handle 4 more minutes of this.
No, absolutely. And, on that note, I just want to say I caught a great interview the other day with John Lott who does such a good job of tracking crime in general, but he did a really, and I was thinking we need to have him on the show to talk about this. He did a really interesting explanation of how, in fact, violent crime is up in spite of the Biden administration showing statistics that it's down. And one of the reasons that it's up is because they are not prosecuting violent crime to the same degree. They're not reporting violent crime to the same degree. So again, I think this is one of those cases where people are being deceived. I think the media is colluding in presenting a false picture to the American people. And the best thing any of us can do who care about our country, who care about the future of our country, is educate our friends and family and neighbors about the truth of what's going on.
And also know you're not crazy, because we all know what we feel, but this administration and the news media, they gaslight us into thinking that there's no problem when we know that we feel that there's a problem.
Amen to that.
All right, let's have some fun.
Yeah.
Because we like to talk about culture. And sadly, the news has been so huge lately. We haven't even been able to have a lot of fun. But you actually went to the movies. Now, are you a popcorn girl? Do you get some popcorn when you go to the movies?
Oh, gosh. Ever since I did PhD weight loss, I don't get popcorn and I miss it.
Popcorn at the movies is a good thing. But I know
agree.
PhD, you know what? I applaud your strength. But when you walk in the movie, you're like, oh, my gosh, I got to get it. Now, you saw Twisters, which I've been really wanting to see. How was it?
I thought it was really fun. Now, to be fair, I have to tell you that the original Twister is one of my all-time favorite movies, which might sound shocking, but it's really a great, great movie. And if you go back and look at it, absolutely incredible cast. So I think
you also want to be a weather girl, I've learned, right?
I was thinking about that. No, I really wanted to be a country and Western singer, but I love, really? Oh, that's so funny. But I will not sing for you because God did not make me a singer. No, I just love, I don't know why. I just think weather is fascinating. Okay. So I love anything that's about weather, right?
You got to come up with a cool weather lady name for you, like Stormy Plains or I don't know.
Oh no, we always talk about like my icon, like when you get Netflix and you get to make your character. I'm always Ice Storm. That's
I love that. Ice Storm. Very good. And that sounds tough and like kind of,
exactly. Tough yet sexy.
That's right. Definitely.
So anyway, having said that Twister was one of my favorites, Twisters doesn't live up to the original. I will say that. But it's a really fun movie. I was really surprised because I am absolutely of the belief that Hollywood has just gone so deep into the woke cesspool. You almost cannot watch anything that comes out of there. So I was really surprised, that Twisters I thought it was really family friendly. I wouldn't take young kids because it's scary. I mean, it's got some real drama, danger in there, but there's only one sort of 10-second hat tip to climate alarmism, which they could have beaten. That. Yeah, they could have beaten a whole lot harder on that, and they didn't. It's pro-relationship. It's fun. It's entertaining. I think the performances are really good. So I think it is safe for happy women to go see Twisters.
Because the one thing I was worried about was the climate change stuff. I really thought they could have been so heavy handed with it. It's Hollywood. I thought this is going to be it. So now that you said it's only just a little bit, I'm in. And Glenn Powell is so cute. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
The star. Very fun. Do they have the good soundtrack? Because the original Twister had a great soundtrack, as I recall.
Oh gosh, that is such a good point. It does have a really good soundtrack, but it's interesting because it's a country and Western soundtrack.
Yeah.
Which I think is really interesting. And for me, it's been really interesting to watch because, I'm a Led Zeppelin girl. I grew up in the 70s really is when I was listening to music. And I love the old 70s rock and roll. I am not a country and Western listener, but my kids really like it. So I think country and Western has kind of come more into the mainstream. So in a way, it shouldn't surprise me that it's a country and Western soundtrack, but it's actually a really good soundtrack.
I think it's funny that you wanted to be a country singer, but you don't really like the music.
I know. Don't ask me to explain it. I can't.
Did you like the outfits? That's kind of fun.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Because I always wanted to be Dolly Parton.
Who doesn't? I mean, she can unite the country. We need Dolly Parton for president, maybe.
No, you love her. I just love Dolly Parton. Yep.
In fact, on that note, and then we will wrap. But I always keep an eye out on Dolly Parton stuff. And she's been doing more and more. You might have seen she has like the cake mix line now that has come out. Like, I don't know if it's through Betty Crocker, whoever, but she's got cake mixes and stuff. And then I saw she came out with the Chardonnay or wine. The other day, I saw that she has and this is the one product I'll get. I didn't get the wine. I didn't get the cake mix. She has a cast iron skillet that's for sale at Costco. That is a Dolly Parton skillet. And it's got a butterfly carved on the bottom of it. And I thought, all right, maybe this is going to be the Dolly product that I can get behind. Plus, she's got the book out. It's fun.
I like that. And I wonder if a part of the proceeds go to support her literacy program. That's
a huge initiative for her.
She sends out free books to kids all over her state. And I love that program. I think that's so beautiful.
I do too. I think it's a great thing. And Dolly's good. I think Dream Vacation, I think next year the happy women should go to Dollywood.
Yes.
You
Sign
want
me
to?
up. Absolutely. I think we need to broadcast from there.
Absolutely. We should get Dollywood. We should tell them we're going to come and we'll see if we can get her on.
Let's get Dolly on the show.
She's a happy woman. We love it.
Oh, 100% she's a happy woman.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining us. Get Katie's book. She is definitely a happy woman. Next Gen Marxism, wherever you get your books. You should also check out her website, katiegorka.org. And you can find her on Facebook. Just search out Catherine Gorka. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram, Jennifer Horn Radio, and on X and on Truth at Jennifer Horn. Thank you so much for the 5-star reviews, sharing this podcast, rating us. We really appreciate it. Every little bit helps. We love to know that you're out there. And if you want to watch us on YouTube or any of the other platforms, you can go to SalemPodcastNetwork.com to get connected. Thanks so much for joining us. It's the Happy Women Podcast.